So I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening, all our families, and I know there's faculty here as well. We're excited to share our full reopening plan. Before we start, I do want to introduce my colleagues on the panel who will also be sharing information tonight. So we do have our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Lewis Wool. We have our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Michael Greenfield. We have our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Brian Ladewig. Joining us this evening at some point is our Supervisor of Elementary Education, Christian McCourtney. He'll be popping in a moment. We have our Director of English Language Arts, Dr. Jamie Cantor. We have our Purchase School Instructional Specialist, Dominique Chiffon. Behind the curtain is our Director of Technology, Brian Seligman, helping out with the webinar. He's like Oz tonight. And of course, I always want to thank our members of our Board of Education for their continued support and for making time for us tonight. We have our Vice President, Kelly Kozak, and Trustee Placido Dino Puccio. Thank you for both being here. Now, okay, Mr. Seligman, I need to be able to share my screen, please.
Our teachers are smiling at us now. This is their life.
Just a day in the life today.
That's right. Did you get your permission?
There we go. And Mr. McCourtney's here. Everything worked at once. Look at that.
All right.
So we're excited this evening to share our plans to bring back our Husky and our Pride cohort together and celebrate our Husky Pride. Throughout the evening, we'll be sharing information around safety, logistics, how we're going to social emotionally support students as we reintegrate the cohorts, and information about instruction from the spring and beyond. Dr. Wool?
Well, I'm so pleased that you can all be here, and even though it might sound odd, I am so excited. Even though I'm doing a lot of meetings, each one just brings me new energy. We have worked really hard to try to present a plan tonight that will make you feel that your kids are being thoughtfully cared for as they return to school. There are going to be some things I say to you tonight that will probably make you unnerved a little bit, but I'm always going to be honest with you. So your K-5 students, hopefully, if everything remains as planned, will return the week of March 22nd. Our hope is to have everybody back on that Monday. It may not be that Monday. It's still our intention to bring them back on Monday. There are a couple of variables, and I'll talk about them in a few minutes, that could influence whether or not it's K3 or K5 all at once, but we are going to get your kids back during that week. Hopefully, I'm still optimistic that we'll hit our March 22nd date. If you are here tonight and you have children in the upper grades or the middle or high school, we're also targeting a return right after spring break. I'm somewhat optimistic about that, but as you will learn today, the governor made a whole bunch of interesting decisions. Dr. Ladewig is kind of dizzy from tracking them throughout the course of the day. And at some point, I know there's a lot of confusion about quarantine, not quarantine, travel, not travel. We're going to talk about all of that. And you will learn that the governor released multiple executive orders, so those rules change actually throughout the course of the next couple of weeks. Next slide, please. Thanks. So nothing has changed from one perspective. Last night I was at the board meeting and so many Purchase moms and dads were either watching or present. I thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts. My mindset and the mindset of the school board is that the health and safety of your children and our faculty and staff still drive all of our decision making. Yes, there are rules. Some of them make sense and some of them don't, but sometimes we will exceed the rules because we don't think the rules do enough to keep your children safe. So we're not just going to bring them back and turn on the lights and say, welcome back. As you'll learn tonight, there have been lots of things that have happened, as you know, since September, and we need to address your children in three ways: their health and safety, their mental state, their social and emotional well-being, and their academic. So one of the big changes will be we are going to lose the hybrid model. Go back one. Thank you. And we'll talk about what that means because virtual has changed as well. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Sometimes people think that the school board or the superintendent get to make any choice that they would like. Oh, were that the case? We are governed by other people. The governor, way back when, made it his priority, which we all agree with, is to get all students back to full instruction as soon as possible. As you know, a lot has changed since he made this edict back in August. Next slide. Who is actually in charge? Well, we like to think we are, and to the extent that we can be in charge, we are. But actually, everything that we do is governed by the New York State Department of Health. Mrs. Kozak has lost her mind over the fact that the interim guidance from August 26, 2020 has never been updated. So even though the CDC, the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association, the American Pediatric Association have all changed their assumptions about many parts of the virus, quarantining, social distancing, the guidance that we are governed by was the guidance that was issued in August. Next slide, thanks. This is what I mentioned to you earlier. In the middle of this Venn diagram used to be the word virtual learning, right? Hybrid learning is gone. I'm sorry, hybrid learning was the middle. Now we're going to have two models. Your kids can either come to school full time, or they can continue, if you choose to, stay in the virtual model. But the virtual model is changing as well. It used to be that your children would Zoom in their Husky or Pride group. Virtual students will be Zooming in every day. Not our favorite idea. Kids get fatigued, they lose interest, but it seems to be the best alternative for the moment. Next slide. So the virtual option will change, and this is the part that might make you a little bit antsy. We're going to now define school vacations as school vacations. That means we would ask that you, if you're going to be an in-person learner, that you're here in person when school is in session. If you are a virtual student, if you decide your child's a virtual student, we ask that you stay out for the full marking period. However, we're not going to hold fast to that rule if we can return your children to school without disrupting the class or the teacher. There'll always be some minor disruption, but it is not our intention to make you stay out. Should you build confidence over time that it is important for your child to return, we want you to come back. So that will be a conversation between the parent and the principal. All of the other rules are essentially the same. We expect your children to keep their cameras on. Your teachers need to interact with them. If your student is ill, you're certainly allowed to Zoom in. We don't want you to miss class through illness. If you're really sick, stay in bed. If you're quarantined, you can still Zoom in. So we want to make the model as flexible as we can, but we also ask that everybody take a pause and remember our teachers. We ask so much of them. They've gone up and down. They've had virtual, hybrid. They've had in-person learning. We added Zooms. Now we're bringing everybody back, and they're going to have kids Zooming in every day. So to the extent that you can help us make their lives more manageable by keeping your kids on a steady diet of one type of learning or another, that will help. If you feel comfortable at the end of this presentation, please bring your kids back to school. And I think we'll build some confidence as we go. So I see we got a student next to our giant machine. That goes to show you how large it is. Mr. Courtwright told me a story when this is the air filtration system. When we brought it in, the kids at Preston School thought it was an ice cream machine. They're greatly disappointed. So a lot of people have said to me, why now? Why are you bringing kids back to school now? Well, so much has changed, and it's been our job to keep track of those changes. Most importantly, we have vaccinations for teachers. And thanks to your help, many of you wrote letters. Our school district actually wrote more letters than the combined district, Sound Shore districts around us, to advocate for teachers being pushed to the front of the line. So actually today and tomorrow, we have 2 full dedicated days for any member of our faculty or staff that hasn't been able to get a vaccine to go to the Westchester Community College, and they can, without an appointment, just show their Harrison ID and get vaccinated. So we now have the ability to vaccinate and protect the adults. That's a game changer. You also participated in a letter writing campaign that not only benefited Harrison, but it benefited all districts across the state of New York. Today, Dr. Ladwick, how many did you pick up today? 1,500 or so?
We're at about 1,750 right now.
So we are doing surveillance testing. That's not something we were able to do way back when because we didn't have access to the tests. And the state has now agreed because we've implemented our surveillance testing. And those of you that have agreed to participate, thank you. Dr. Ladewell will be putting the link in the Q&A. If you haven't given us permission, please do. The larger the sample, the better. But your letter writing resulted us in getting us free tests. But probably the game changer for me was being able to find an air filtration system that does what we hoped it would do. Now, I got a nastygram from some parents saying, why did you wait until now to buy these machines? The answer to that question is simple. They didn't exist in September. They're very new. We researched a whole bunch. We had 2 manufacturers bring these on site. Actually, Mrs. Kozak and Mr. Sullivan were present for the demonstration. We picked what we think is one of the most important mitigation strategies that we could have found. And the good news is it protects your children not only now, but going forward. It removes virus from the air. It uses a 3-tiered system, MERV, HEPA, and UV light. And in a typical classroom, and ours are not typical, they're some are somewhat smaller. This unit was tested in a 1,000 square foot classroom. Yours is about 550 to 700. It literally removes and cleanses the air 3 to 5 times in an hour. That to me is a game changer because here's what I want you to know. Even though the virus doesn't necessarily make children sick, it does make some children sick, and it makes some children severely sick. So we don't want to create a circumstance where I don't feel it's safe for your children to be in school. So in order to bring them all back, we're obviously going to narrow the social distancing. The virus load with a whole bunch of people in a room goes up. This device ensures that not only are we changing the air, we're cleansing it. It's a unique device. It's really thoughtfully designed. One of the key reasons we bought it is that it's the only device we saw that doesn't blow air onto children or teachers. It blows it straight up in the air. One of the key safety features of any system for ventilation with COVID is never to blow air across a room because you don't know who's infected. It also is the only unit that pulls air from the bottom because the virus is heavy. It sinks to the middle of the room, literally pulls it from the floor, cleans it, and shoots it back up. Mrs. Kozak, maybe you want to talk about what you experienced because you were in the classroom, you heard it, you saw it operate.
Sure. I was extremely impressed. So it's a very large machine, but it's a gentle hum. It's kind of like a soothing white noise machine is the sound. What I found really impressive is I love that the teachers have access to, there's like a little nozzle on it where they can control the output. So basically, from 0% to 100%, they can determine the level that they would like. So if students are learning in the classroom and they don't want it to be too loud, which it's never that loud, but if they want to keep it at 40% per se, and then the kids go off to PE, they can jack it up to 80% and do a quick clean and have a complete and total control of it. I sat in front of it. The room that we tested it in had the flag directly above it, and it was barely moving, which is an excellent sign that it's not forcefully blowing air. It controls the amount of air that's slowly released and moving through the MERV HEPA filter and the UV light. So the whole system is, brilliantly designed. And I was extremely impressed that it's going to definitely keep our kids safe. And my other question, which was so interesting, was if there's a child sitting directly next to it, are they safer than a child that may be completely across the room? And the answer was absolutely not. It's cleaning the entire air in the room over the course of an hour, multiple times, 3 to 5 times per hour. So, that was another impressive asset to it.
Thank you for that summary. That's I'm tired of hearing myself talk. I'd much rather hear you tell the story because you were there. So let's just talk about this though. So why are we putting such a high priority? I want to go back to the issue of who's in charge and what the rules are. So there was a lot of noise a couple of weeks ago about the concept of barriers. There was a story that we didn't buy barriers. By the way, we have barriers. We were trying not to install barriers because from my perspective, with the research that I've done, it's a stupid idea because barriers degrade the quality of instruction. It's harder for teachers to project their voices. It's harder for kids to hear. It's harder for people to see. And it also slows the airflow. So I made that case to the New York State Department of Health because in my role, I think my job is not to just accept the rules, but try to influence behavior. And there was some misperception somehow that our plan wasn't approved. No, our plan was always approved because it exceeds the standards, but we don't accept the rules. We try to influence them to benefit your children. So now I'm going to say something else. I'm not going to bring your kids back until these machines are in place. So that could be a reason that some of the kids don't make it back on the 22nd. We were the first district in the state of New York to place an order. This is a multinational company. They're working really hard. We have 30 in place. We expect another 40 in the next few days. And they're promising on Sunday, the 21st, the remaining order so that we can fully open the elementary schools K-5. I will let you know in that week leading up to a spring break if in fact we're going to bring K-5 or if it's going to be K-4 or K-3, but our goal is K-5. Now, why not bring them back? Because I've just told you that barriers are essentially useless. Masks, this little 2-ply mask, and that ventilation system will make your kids, in my estimation, safer than any kids in the state of New York. Because this mask, if I wear it and you wear it, the research says it reduces the likelihood of infection by over 90%. The ventilation system is constantly working. It's removing virus from the air, killing it, and returning fresh air. So I know we're all anxious. I promise you, we are as anxious as you, but I'm also anxious to do it right. My mom's 90 years old. She has COVID. She's doing great. I have teenagers at Harrison High School that have COVID that are not doing great. I'm not going to put your children at risk for a day or 2 days. Be patient with us. We are always thinking ahead. We have a good plan in place. You'll hear more about it tonight. We'll continue some of the things we've always done. The big difference is your kids won't be socially distanced at 6 feet. They'll be socially distanced at 3. Vaccinations, surveillance testing, ventilation, masks. Next slide. This is all old news to you. We just want you to know a lot isn't changing. We're going to continue to do all the things right that we've been doing. We're going to have kids wash their hands. We're going to make sure there's hand sanitizers, the water bottle filling stations. Obviously, make your kids bring water bottles. That helps a lot. All of that's going to remain. We're going to stay mindful of the good behaviors that got us into the place we are. Next slide.
I just want to add what a great job the students have done following all those procedures and being safe.
Absolutely. And Philomena, I promise you, not that you ever ask a lot of questions, but we will definitely get to that question in great detail. We're going to show you how the first days are going to look like and what's going to change for kids. This is our own custodian, Bert, wonderful man, does a great job. That's him doing his nightly hydrostatic cleaning of every classroom. All of that will continue. Just a reminder, all of our chemicals are EPA approved for safety for kids.
I just want to take a moment to point out how great the custodial staff at Purchase School always has been, but continues to be through this, and how vital they are to keeping a health and safety environment for our kids. They all done a great job this year.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. We will continue to wear masks. Adam's going to weigh in on some of the details, but we are very serious about the wearing of masks inside and outside. Everything that we have studied indicates that it is the simplest and most effective way to protect one another. Even though our teachers will reach close to full vaccination, we are going to insist that they wear masks. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. And we're still learning more, as you know, about the virus and the variants, and obviously other people's behaviors can impact that. If people don't get vaccinated and they continue to let this virus flourish, then the opportunity for variants continues. But right now, we're having great success. Dr. Laidwood could tell you, and he will at some point, that all of the surveillance testing that we've implemented has revealed 0 positive cases. So that's terrific news. Adam, I know you want to talk about the exceptions to wearing masks, so I'll turn it back to you for a second there.
Yeah, so everyone's on school property, visitors, staff, students are expected to wear masks all the time. And I want to thank members of the community for wearing their masks when they're on site. Let's make sure we keep doing that because we want to keep a healthy and safe environment. And we also want to model appropriate good behavior for students. So anytime you're on school property, let's make sure we're wearing masks. And I thank you for continuing to do that. Times where students won't be wearing masks are if they're eating or drinking, if there's a medical condition that prevents the wearing of that, and that's few and far between. And also when they'll be having snack. And as we're looking to bringing more students back, snack will either occur in a larger space, outdoors, especially on a day like today, where so many students next to my courtyard window having their snack outside, or in 2 groups so that we can still maintain some social distancing while their masks are off. And of course, lunch, as we've always continued to have.
Hey, can you just talk, Jacqueline asked a question about snacks, and I know snacks is a big concern at the elementary level. By the way, I think everybody should have a snack, but how do we handle it at the elementary level?
So snacks are brought in by kids. Now they're eating during the cold months in their classroom at 6 feet apart. Once everyone's back, they'll be eating in either a larger space, because we have some, and we have some air-conditioned larger spaces for the warm months, outdoors, where they can socially distance, or we'll be splitting into 2 groups so that they can eat a little more distance in the classroom and behind their barriers.
And there's another question. It's so far my favorite question of the night. I'm at the middle school where my office is, and mask breaks are the single most popular thing about the pandemic. Can somebody explain how we do mask breaks?
So there's a couple ways we would do mask breaks. It could be a whole class plan mask break. So noticing that the kids are starting to get a little fidgety or need a little bit of a break, they may take a mask break in the classroom in a large space, same as we were doing snack or outdoors. There also may be times where a specific student just needs a break, and we've coordinated that with teachers so that they have a place to go and they can just take a moment privately to remove their mask and then come back to class.
And maybe we should just clarify that we are going to maintain social distancing. I know you said it, but I see it popped up in the chat again. We are going to maintain 6 feet of social distancing for lunch by creating an alternate space for lunch. You want to just go through that one more time, because people are, this is a lot of information, so we might repeat ourselves. I apologize if we do, folks.
For lunch specifically, and I'm going to talk, there's a whole slide for lunch coming up. So
okay, so we can hold on. Yep. All righty. Visitors are still going to be limited. There they are. That's what a barrier is. I fought really hard against barriers because they don't help, but they will be in place. They are on hand. The reason I don't like them is I've observed them in practice in other districts. And so what you find is the kids are actually inside the little barrier. Now look at me, I'm pushing away from my desk. How are you today? I'm outside of the barrier. They don't really do anything to prevent kids from breathing in the room, and they make it much harder for kids to hear, much more difficult for teachers to instruct. We're still pushing on the state to reconsider that. We offered an alternative that I didn't think was necessary, the face shield, but we'll see. We're in the process of rearranging your classrooms. It may be that your classrooms get rearranged before this happens, because we don't want to throw everything at the custodians at the last minute. So we'll be reconfiguring the classes, even though they're still be 6 feet apart. We're going to create the spaces as if they were 3 feet apart and start to put the barriers in, so that when we open school, kids will come in and also teachers will already have their classrooms reorganized. One less thing for them to be concerned about. But here's where you can really help us. And this is not a finance issue as much as you think. We really need your help. If you're able to transport your child to school, or even someone else's child in a socially distant environment in a car, that will be helpful to us, because it's almost impossible for us to get additional buses at this time of year. No one expected kids to come back to school. They're not available. Bus drivers aren't available. So to the extent you can help, please do. And if you can't, that's fine too. We'll figure it out. Or if you say yes and you have to change your mind, as we mentioned in the survey, that's perfectly acceptable as well. Next slide, please.
There we go.
There you go. I think I talked about this, but I just want to say that it is possible that sometimes kids won't be socially distant on school buses. We believe we'll be able to do this. First and foremost, if we have to combine kids, it'll be siblings first. And if once we get the data back from you, we'll know more about that and we'll figure out a solution. But if you can help with this, you can. On the school bus, you must wear a mask. Don't worry if your child forgets a mask. Every bus driver has a supply of masks. We will make this kind of the same as it's been, except more kids.
So we're going to maintain the daily health screenings. So each morning you still get a Crisis Go survey. You should be filling that out every day. And we're going to ask that this be done going forward. It's really essential now that we're going to have more students coming to the entrances of the school that the screeners filled out so we can safely and quickly move them into the school building and start their day. So just a reminder around entry procedures, not much has changed here. Student arrival is between 8 a.m. and 8:50 a.m. Some reminders, kindergarten and first grade will still come through the multipurpose lobby door and they'll be scanned with their tags. Second and third grade will come through the gymnasium side door. And a slight change back to where we started, fourth and fifth grade will now use the courtyard door. The many feet of snow has melted finally and we can access that door. And once students are in the building, they'll report to designated areas by grade levels and will maintain social distancing as they arrive. Okay, the lunch slide. So we are going to have more students, which does necessitate having 2 lunch sites during the school day. We're going to maintain the cafeteria, and we're going to also use the multi-purpose room. And the way it'll work is students will be in their Husky Pride cohorts that they have been in, so they're having lunch with students they're familiar with, and then they will rotate. So if a Pride group is in the cafeteria on an A day, then the Husky group's in the multi-purpose room. On a B day, the Husky group will be in the cafeteria, and the Pride group will be in the multi-purpose room. Students will be assigned to the same number table each day, so they only have to remember their table number. It's the same number. And this allows everybody to have the same rotation and experience as each other. So they're always in this alternating spaces. We are maintaining 6 feet of distance as we've done throughout the year during lunch. So students, there'll be 2 students to a long table, 6 feet apart. Hot lunch and snacks will be available in the multi-purpose room, just like they are in the cafeteria. So everybody will have the same access to food in both spaces. One change we are making is at recess, and this is an exciting change for our students. The playground and equipment will be in use. So we're going to allow them access to that. Students will sanitize their hands prior to going out to recess. They'll then play. When they come back in, they'll then sanitize their hand again as they come back into the building. Important to note that the students will be grouped by class for recess and they'll rotate through the spaces. So we'll be using the field, the blacktop, and the playground in rotation. So everybody gets a chance in the same spaces in a rotation throughout the days.
And I think if the kids were here, that would be the end of the presentation. We could just go home now because the playground's open and they get to do some kid-like things.
I can tell you which grade levels would cheer the loudest.
Next slide, please.
So just a reminder about our dismissal procedures. These are the times we've been using all year. We're going to maintain the staggered dismissal so that we don't have congestion at pickup. I'm going to ask and remind everybody to please, once you have your children, please leave the school area because we don't want to have a congregation of people. We want to be able to get a smooth rotation of students coming out of the building so we can clear the area after school. And important thing to note that we didn't cover on the last slide as far as playgrounds, they will not be open at the end of the school day, but they will be open on the weekends.
And obviously the reason for that is we don't want large groups of people congregating at the end of the day. And please, please, please always be a role model for your children. Try to stay socially distant. As Adam said, it's so helpful. Dr. Lader, can you make sure you monitor that chat? There's a bunch of vaccination questions in there. You can read and publish the answers if you don't mind, as the resident guru on all that. All that's COVID.
So as we return students to having both cohorts at school together, we're going to make some changes to the schedule. So currently in the hybrid model, we have double letter days. So Tuesday, Wednesday are both an A day. Thursday, Friday would be a B day. We're going to be returning to consecutive A through F days. And students, if we return on March 22nd, that would start as an F day. The 23rd would be an A day. The 24th would be B day. And we would then continue through the cycle from there. The calendar will be published on the Purchase School website like it is every month. You may have some minor changes to your child's daily schedule as we bring everyone back. An exciting piece is we will have orchestra and band lessons here on site, but only lessons, not the full orchestra and band at the moment. And our AIS and support services will be on site except for our fully virtual students. So everything's going to be happening here. So this is Nurse Linda, who's new
Before you go on, just a bunch of questions because I want to give people a chance to catch up because some of them are writing questions, some are listening to us. There's a whole bunch of busing questions. We'll just take a pause. Here's the thing. We appreciate anything you can do. If you can take your kids in the morning and not in the afternoon, that's fine. If you need busing, whether it's part-time or full-time, just say, I need busing. Put your kids on when you need to. Don't put them on when you don't. We're going to assume they're going to be there all the time, and we appreciate any effort you can make. I think we're going to be okay, but if you need it, don't agonize over, I only need it part-time. Just say yes, and whenever you can transport your children, please do. Okay? I hope that clarifies it. And there's a question about dismissal there. I don't know the answer to that. Look at Michelle and Laura both have questions. Will the kids be able to play on the playground blacktop and field during the same lunch period? And is the 5th grade dismissal 3 o'clock or 3:05?
5th grade is 3 o'clock. And the kids will be in different areas during recess. So one class will be on the blacktop, one on the field, one on the playground, but they'll be as a whole class for that instead of separated into their Husky pride.
Yeah, hopefully we're going to actually get kids to meet one another that have been in the same class all year.
Yes.
Thank you, Adam.
You're
I
welcome.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nope, that's okay. I would rather answer the questions before we get to
Yep.
you. So many of you have spoken to Nurse Linda, but she's new this year and you may not have met her. So this is Nurse Linda, and we began our COVID surveillance testing at Purchase School this Monday. And Linda has been integral in so much of, and all our school nurses in the district have been integral in keeping these buildings moving and answering questions and supporting families. So Monday we had our first surveillance testing and it went really smoothly. I thank the faculty who were part of it and the parents for their cooperation and having a smooth morning. If you do get chosen, or when you do get chosen, you will be notified a few days in advance. You'll come to the Purchase School parking lot to the lower field, follow the posted signs around to Nurse Linda. She'll greet you, she'll perform the test, and you'll come back in 15 minutes for your results. It's very easy and was very, very smooth this week.
But just a pause right here because some of the questions, and this is a good chance for Brian to also sort of catch people up. Great question. What percentage, and by the way, congratulations, Purchase Elementary School parents, you have a very high participation rate and consent level. Brian can talk to that. And Brian, do you just want to answer some of those other questions? I'll take the Monday question, but what's going to happen next? Can people still participate? How do they do that?
Yeah, the surveillance testing is going to be ongoing throughout the remainder of the school year. So we anticipate that the testing day at Purchase School will be Monday mornings. We'll continue to select a random representative sample for each Monday. That includes both students and staff. And we draw that from the folks that have given us consent, right? So it's important that anybody that wants to participate, and we encourage everybody to participate. We've got a great participation rate at Purchase. In about 80%, which is great. And that's going to help us to avoid repeating because we want to test as many people over these recurring Mondays as we possibly can. But I just want to underscore, if you haven't seen the video that we prepared, and especially if your child is perhaps maybe anxious or you're anxious on behalf of your child about getting tested, the thing I can share with you is that this is a very minimally invasive test. It's just inside the nose. It's not the deep swab. If you've had that experience, that's not very pleasant. This is not that. And when we did it the first day on Monday, it involved kids from every grade level, and everybody was happy and smiling, and there were no tears from parents or students. So that's great. And so I just encourage everybody's participation. It's a great way for us to keep dipsticking on our school community. And as Dr. Wool said, we've done over 150 tests now, Purchase and other schools, and we've had 0 positive cases, which is really great news.
And Brian, at some point, I think you can put in the consent link again, if you don't mind. And
yeah,
also,
just to say, without the chat, there's only the ability to respond.
Oh, so we have to find
questions.
another
We
way to
don't-
get it out to you. We'll have Adam send it out to the whole parent base
Sure.
along with the video, which stars one of your own students. It's quite adorable. I just want to take a pause again. People are asking questions, and I hope this is helpful. We will get through the slides, and we will not leave until we've answered all of your questions. You might not be happy with the answers, but we will answer them. So here's a good example of how I don't get to make anybody happy. So you're probably not happy that I can't guarantee you the 22nd, and our teachers are not happy that Mondays will become a full day. and I certainly understand why they're not. But we are going to work as hard as we can to try to find ways to support them, because they continue to have to make all kinds of shifts in their own practice to support your children. So Monday will be returning to a full day of instruction. I haven't made the decision as to when that would happen. For example, if I'm only able to bring K3 back on that week of the 22nd until Wednesday, then it's very likely that that Monday might be a half day. You will know all those things well in advance, but this is a very evolving story. It changes day to day. As you learned today, the rules changed from the governor on what it means to quarantine. So my hope is the first week of school, the 22nd, will be K5, everybody in. I'll let you know. But right now, as much as I would love to provide additional preparation time for our teachers who have done an extraordinary job, I'm in this difficult space where I have to try to do as much good for as many people as I can. And I'm saying out loud, everybody is sacrificing. Nobody has sacrificed more than teachers. I acknowledge that. And I would ask that everybody on this Zoom remember to give some grace to teachers in this moment in time, to be patient with teachers in this moment in time. I can guarantee you, as hard as we're working, we're going to make mistakes. Work with us. This is not going to be easy, but we can do it if we're all supportive of one another in a genuine way. There are always ways to find what we're doing wrong. Your teachers have been working harder than they ever have. Your administrators have been working harder than they ever have. And I know that you've been stressed. Let's remember this is about kids, and we're going to make this work. Next slide, sir, unless you want to.
I just want to pause and make sure we were good on the questions. So you've heard a lot about physical safety and how we're going to support students, but we're also thinking about how we support them in their social emotional development and how we're going to continue to use structures to care for them as we return both cohorts to school. So some of the structures we have in place include morning meetings, and that's for all students K through 5, which the teacher orients students to the day in the morning, greets them, goes through anything they need to know as far as the agenda and talking about the starting of the day and throughout the day. We have class meetings, which are also K5, and those are topics and conversations that are chosen by the teacher, developmentally appropriate for the age of students. And those are activities and discussions that help bring students together and also helps bring students and teachers together and make connections with each other. We have a school psychologist who supports the work in each of our classrooms and with specific plans for students. The district and the school have a partnership with Harrison Youth Council, and they've been working with some of our students throughout the year, both in skill development and through lunch bunch groups. And we also teach into explicit social emotional skills, which Ms. Chiffone, our instructional specialist, is going to highlight a little bit more.
Just go back one step, because I want to make sure I just add one piece that I think is so important for all of us to remember. You know, there's a lot of news reports about the traumatized child. And I'm not saying that some children haven't experienced this in very powerful ways that have been damaging to them. But some kids have done okay. Some kids need a little bit of support. And so this pyramid is really important for us to think about as parents. We need to be careful about the language we use. We need to be careful that we message to our kids that they are safe. We need to be mindful that not every child that's returning to school needs the same thing. And our work, as you'll learn more, if you hear from Dominique in a minute, is to actually make sure that every part of this journey is as personalized for your children as it can be. Their social emotional well-being is not the same as their brother or sister or their classmate. And we're going to really try to look hard at all the information we have before they get back. And I will get back to some of the questions in the chat. But before you do, Adam, one of the questions is about, did we consider forestalling this until after the spring break? Excellent question. We decided not to, because we thought the more time that we could have. So don't think about this as a return to school, folks. That's not how we're seeing it. We're trying to get your kids using April, May, June, July, and August, feeling more comfortable, feeling more connected, feeling more academically capable, so that when they return in September, it'll actually feel like a school year that they're familiar with. So we did think about slowing it down. We also have thought, and I've been all over the map on this, I called a week of virtual learning after the February break. I'm not going to do that after the spring break. And the reason is this: I've actually learned that the more free time kids have on their hands, particularly teenagers, the less helpful that is. So we're going to bring everybody back, but we're going to remind you all that you need to be on your best behavior during spring break. So I hope and that has to do with the social emotional well-being of kids, because if we keep quarantining people and school goes up and down, that's not helpful. So differentiation, long-term planning. All right, Dominique, you're on.
Thank you, Dr. Wool. So as Dr. Wool just described, we know and believe that supporting students' social emotional wellness is critical to their success. And so as we prepare to bring all students back, we continue to think about the ways to create a safe and secure emotional environment. We know now more than ever, kids are having lots of different feelings about everything that's happening around them, especially when it comes to school. And we want to provide engaging and meaningful opportunities for them to develop the skills that they need to manage all of those feelings. So part of our social emotional work at Purchase involves lessons that are centered around 6 core concepts, and all of them connect back to kindness. These lessons integrate Common Core standards, and they're aligned with the framework from CASEL, which is a research-based organization that shares our belief that high quality and evidence-based social emotional learning is an essential part of education. If you enter a classroom during one of these lessons, you will see teachers utilizing picture books and engaging students in interactive read-alouds. You'll see teachers watching videos or playing games that inspire discussions or friendly debates about different topics. And as you see in this photo, 2 students are playing a game inspired by Chutes and Ladders after a lesson about integrity. And while working through these different scenarios together, they are reminded that honest choices and perseverance are like ladders. We will need them to move up in life with others and with ourselves. And sometimes we'll hit chutes, like not making a team we tried out for, or maybe forgetting something at home that we needed for school that day. But it doesn't mean that we're stuck back at the beginning, and to remember that we can always find a ladder to help us move forward, which can also be a valuable lesson for us as adults. And this activity and others like it support the development of the skills that will empower our students with language and tools that they need to be successful in and out of the classroom.
Dominique, can you just tell people the source of that research? Because everything we do here comes from someplace.
So it's inspired by Random Acts of Kindness, and that is connected to our Common Core standards in ELA and cross-curricular. So it integrates different mathematics and science as well. And then CASEL, it comes out of the University of Chicago, and they have a framework that inspires all of the skills that they believe students need to be able to be successful in life, academically and socially.
Thank you. That's so important for people to know that we work really hard at trying to embed these things. This is not an event. It's an experience that kids should have on a regular basis. Well done. Thanks. Next slide. Oh, I love this slide.
Yes. So morning meetings. This is how your children are going to begin their day in the classroom. They're 4-part meetings, and they give our students the opportunity to build connections with one another and create a culture of trust and safety in the classroom. So each morning, your child will begin the day by personally being greeted by his or her classmates. And this is really just the most basic way of providing a sense of belonging and helping each child feel welcome and celebrated. And then students are provided with a prompt or question and an opportunity to share their thinking. So in this example, you'll see students were asked to share 3 different words they would use to describe themselves. And that really strengthens their communication and their ability to self-reflect. And it gives teachers the opportunity to learn about how their students see themselves and think about how powerful that information can be for a teacher. And then students will complete a short activity. And these activities encourage collaboration and positive behavior towards others. And in this example, you'll see that students used a colorful digital Post-it note tool to give their classmates compliments. And this is a really intentional way to build connections and strengthen those student-to-student relationships. And think about the joy that kids experience just going back and reading all the nice things that their classmates and teachers had to say about them. And then for the last part of the meetings, students will read a brief note or message from their teacher that will further reinforce skills and spark excitement about something that they have learned or will be learning that day. And here, this morning message asks students to apply math skills to brainstorm ideas about different numbers. So morning meetings have become a part of our daily routines, and they're just really thoughtful and engaging ways to start each day. And they help to build that sense of community and really set our students up for success for their day, both socially and academically.
Thank you. That was well done.
Thank you.
Dominique spoke about some of the specific structures that exist to support students in our classroom. We're also planning, as we plan for have students back, whole school activities that will bring the whole community together. So things like a virtual story walk with the book One Green Apple, where students will look at the themes of inclusion and caring. Some purchase school spirit days to celebrate us all being back together. And our continued work around kindness and the concepts that are embedded there and that we study throughout the day.
Yeah. I might come over for that virtual walk if you don't mind.
We'll let you know when we're having. Connections are an important part of all of our classes. Our approach to physical education is to build connection, community, mindfulness, and teamwork. Students engage in collaborative activities and work to build skills and accomplish goals together. They also provide each other feedback at the end of each class about how they upheld the principles of teamwork and cooperative play. Students and classes can earn the Big Shoes to Fill Award, which you can see here, which are actual donated basketball shoes, based on the feedback they provide to one another, building a sense of self-awareness and also community. In addition, we're very excited to be increasing our music in the building live here. So we'll continue with our general music and art classes that happen rotating throughout the cycle. But as I mentioned earlier, we'll be returning orchestra and band lessons to school once per cycle as well. Band lessons currently will occur at 12 feet social distancing, and orchestra will be at 6 feet. But as the weather gets nicer, we're looking at what else we can do outside and in different ways to increase the level of music we have in the building.
Yeah, I'm excited for that to actually come about. I think the kids miss the performing arts more than we know. And obviously we have been so limited in what we can do, although your music teachers and your physical educators have done a great job. But this is a point where I want to pause. I don't typically like graphics, but I don't know how many of you saw the journal news today, actually yesterday. There was a major article about school districts not knowing where their kids are. Not physically where they are, but where they are academically, where they are emotionally. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is the good work that we did with this team. Last year, you're going to hear more about that from my assistant superintendent, Michael Greenfield. We knew that this was going to be a challenging time for kids. I don't like the word learning loss, but certainly they have not made as much progress as they would have in typical environments, although some, frankly, have progressed quite well. But we had a plan for that monitoring. You're going to hear all about that. So when your kids come back, you just heard Adam and Dominique speak pretty compellingly about making sure that we attend to their emotional well-being, making them feel like a community again. But it's just as important to us that they not be disoriented in any way academically, because the teachers are going to continue to go forward with the curriculum, but they need to determine where your kids are when they come back and keep them growing in any areas that they might have developed either a deficit or need support. And we have a plan for that. We have a way of knowing where they are. You're going to hear all about that, I think, in a way that I hope you find compelling. Next slide. Mr. Greenfield.
Thank you, Dr. Will. So we've talked about health and safety. We've talked about the social, emotional, mental health of students, and we want to spend some time now talking about how we have been and continue to prepare students for their academic success, even under such extraordinary conditions as we've all experienced. And I'll introduce this as a concept, not as detail. So if you feel like you're looking at this and saying, I don't know if I can follow this, just see this as a broad brushstroke. There are 5 big ideas that we follow consistently in all planning that we do. And the instructional plan or roadmap for the return that we started last spring and continued through the summer and continued through the fall and continue was always with the plan that we would be reopening full time. For the hybrid model, we used the research in partnership with outside experts and internal assessments to determine how to design a hybrid program that would be the strongest hybrid program we could possibly put in place under the conditions with a fluid environment with evolving conditions. Then we designed the program, and so that's the second step, and we designed it last summer to reopen in September. And then during the summer, we built action research teams who looked at what we thought would work and tested it in hybrid learning environments, in virtual learning, to see what worked and what didn't. Then we implemented it, and then we assessed it, adapted, and adjusted it. So the key is that there are systems in place. We're systematically looking at instruction always, consistently, and adapting it to these conditions. We are systemic in our approach, but as Dr. Wool and Mr. Gutterman, everybody else has said, we're also committed to personalizing instruction. So we work, I work among some of the finest instructional leaders that I think any organization has put together. And we often talk about they work in the background, they're not front and center, but they are working in partnership with me and the principals to make sure that we have an instructional game plan that's solid, that teachers have the support they need and the systems they need to be successful. And I'll have to tell you, the key, first and foremost, are our teachers. Our teachers know your children. They know them social emotionally, and they certainly know them academically, and they've been monitoring student progress since last year, and they hand off that information to their colleagues as we plan for the reopening. So I want to drill into this just a bit and give you some insight into how we approach this and why we have a tremendous amount of confidence in the data that we've collected and our instructional plan moving forward. Can you just move to the next slide? Over the past actually 10 years, we've been collecting data at a standardized level. And you've now seen evidence of this, even if you've been virtual, in the MAP assessment. The MAP assessment is a diagnostic tool that we use to collect information about where students are against learning standards and how they're doing against growth targets. This is very important for us because it gives us an external benchmark. And when the state didn't have assessments last year and we didn't have external measures, we continue to use this tool. So we partnered with an outside organization, a national research group called Hanover Research, and NWEA, which is an internationally recognized assessment, nonprofit assessment company that's been in business for 25 years, to make sure that we collected information and projected how much learning loss was possible and how much was actual. So the projected versus the actual. So we took 3 years of data about every one of your students. So kindergarten, first grade, second grade, if they're third graders, and so on. We collected classroom assessment information from teachers. We continue to look at student work, and we rely heavily on teacher expertise, professional judgment, and their observations of students, both in class, in person, and obviously remotely. And we engaged this group in a study. Can you go to the next slide? Just to give you a visual of what this looks like, you're looking at 2 different grade levels that our teachers basically will have access to this extraordinarily comprehensive data. And they do have this information, and we help them to make use of this information for instructional planning. On the left-hand side, you can see that every dot on that line drawing on this regression scale is an individual student's performance. And you can see there are students, certainly that clustered in this math example, below the normal line, if you will, the standard growth line. But there are many students who have been performing above that standard line. And so on the right-hand side, that's an upper level cluster. And you can see that for the most part, the majority of students are somewhere surrounded by, their performance is surrounded, it's surrounding the normal line. The key point to understand about this is that we have trend data for grade levels based on our curriculum expectations. We have individual data on each individual student that we use to inform our instruction. And so we want you to feel confident. We want you to be assured. We know that we can't make up for all learning loss in a short period of time, but we have a plan to do this from the spring through the summer into and through the fall, because we know that students can make progress and accelerate, and we have every confidence in our teachers to make that happen. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. McCourtney, my colleague who's a supervisor of elementary instruction, to talk in more detail as to how we're building our programs using these data to inform the program development for this current spring and summer.
And before you start, Christian, I just want to say I want to point out something to you. So this is a really important piece of who we are. We do not view your children as a test score. I know there's anxiety. It came up at the board meeting last night. What about state assessments? What is that going to mean for our kids? When we collect information on your children, we collect it from multiple measures, and Christian's going to talk about that. But your kids are not coming back strangers to us because there's been a pandemic. We planned, we brought in outside experts, we looked at our own expert information, and everything you hear going forward, each one of those dots was one of your children. Those are known human beings to us. Your children know them. We will work with them to interpret that data. And you're going to hear, Christian McCourtney was a teacher in our district. He was a teacher at Purchase School. He became an instructional coach, and now he is the supervisor of elementary education. He continues to do incredible work. He's one of the reasons, he and the instructional coaches, that the quality of our lesson planning remains so high, and that our teachers have been able to climb what is an impossible mountain and still keep our kids on track academically. We know it wasn't perfect, but I just want to acknowledge how much that team has done. Mr. McCourtney, you're on.
Thank you, Dr. Wool, and what an honor to speak to this audience at the place where I spent much of my career here at Harrison. So a wonderful element of our great community. So to expand on what Mr. Greenfield started, it's important that we note where all of this work starts, and it is with the students, your students. They're at the heart of everything that we do, and determining what they know and what they need is critical to how we design our instruction and our programs to be responsive and supportive of student learning. So what you're looking at here is the multiple measure wheel. We don't just ascertain what we know about a student based off of one assessment, but rather many. And some of them are done externally, as Mr. Greenfield referred to, and many of them are done really locally, right next to your children with the teachers, where they can get that information that they need in a timely manner. So Mr. Greenfield spoke a lot about NWA MAP, and what that does for us as a district, how we can pull out, zoom out, and look at where are the current trends of needs in terms of our learners across the district, within a school, even within a grade level. But we can also use that information, as Dr. Wool was pointing out, to figure out where exactly an individual student is ready to go next. So it's a very useful tool. Our teachers use classroom artifacts to provide real-time data about students, and therefore they can make adjustments on the fly. So that happens on a daily basis, really down to the lesson and even within minutes within the lesson. Our local assessments are designed in conjunction with teachers. They are standards-based, and they highlight critical information that students need to know at a grade level and where they are in their understanding of it. Students are also given opportunities to reflect on their own learning so that they are owners in the process, and also provide teachers and ourselves with their perspective on their learning. We tend to learn things like how students learn best and what kind of styles that they learn best in through those processes. And finally, teacher feedback is a critical component of this wheel. Our professionals are in the field and giving us real-time information so that we're able to make adjustments to, like, the scope and sequence or academic calendar in order to put more emphasis in a certain area if we feel that's needed based on teacher feedback. Next slide, please. So with that information, we're armed to make decisions that will be responsive and meet the needs of our students. And we're excited to report that we are in the planning stages of creating these responses and these programs for our summer. These are 3 summer programs that we are working on right now. The first is the foundational concepts and skills, and this is born out of our Bridges program. This is an invitation program, meaning students would be invited based on demonstrating that they have a need to work on maintenance of skills and important concepts coming out of their grade level. This 3-week course will really be supportive in welcoming students back to school in the fall. We are also excited to announce an enrichment workshop program because we recognize that the pandemic has had an effect on all students. And so this workshop program will be available to all students. We will be mindful of scheduling so that students in the foundational concepts and skills program will have access to the enrichment workshops as well. But it will be interest-based, it will be inquiry-based, it will be fun, and it will develop community within the students, as well as highlight some exciting areas of study, such as engineering, where students may build balsa wood bridges and determine how much force that they can sustain, perhaps a reader's theater that ends in a production, and maybe a coding class as well. So those are things that we're going to explore and develop. We will also create a community connection event at each school so that we can bring the whole school together over the summer and prepare them to be ready from a social emotional standpoint to enter the fall. So some exciting things there.
So just to pause before we switch slides, thank you, Christian. Excellent job. And I know Ms. Kozak and Mr. Puccio are familiar with these ideas. It's an important thing for you to know that these 3 elements, I think, reflect our philosophy about children. So some may have an academic need, but many kids want to experience the joy of learning again. And we are about bringing the community back together. So I've already given 2 or 3 updates on my proposed budget for the coming year. These are the 3 legs of the summer's program, and we are going to put those in place with your support and help. In addition to that, all of the data that Michael shared with you and that Christian illuminated will determine what programs we put in that bucket of foundation and conceptual skills. So this is a highly differentiated program. Last year, we changed our summer program completely. Didn't look anything like the year before because our belief is it's our job to adapt to the kids and not for the kids to adapt to us. And that is how we personalize this experience. This is about your children in this moment in time. So I don't know if either board member wants to weigh in. Are you guys good? You good? Okay, so Dino? No?
No, I'm good. Yep.
Okay, so I am going to go back to open questions at the end, but we are at a critical moment in terms of how you should think about your kids. So you heard some wonderful, remember where we started this piece? Some people don't know where their kids are. We know where your kids are. You know where your kids are, and we're preparing for them to come back in a meaningful way. It's not welcome back, turn on the lights. Now we're going to talk about some other central ideas that are sometimes overlooked about how do we invite kids into the work. Next slide, please.
Just before we get that, this timeline illustrates the work that we're doing in an effort to prepare students for the fall. Everything that we do from this point forward is with that in mind. Additional to the programs I just described for students, we have professional development programs for our teachers. And so we'll be running a robust course catalog that will support teachers in looking at the data that we have coming out of this current school year and thinking about best practices and research-based approaches to teaching students in the fall. We'll also run courses that will run side by side with our student programs so that our teachers feel well supported in their development of those programs and in the facilitation of them. So that brings us to the more immediate horizon, which is our spring. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide.
Hey, Christian, before you go on, can you and Michael just talk about what last summer was like, how many courses we ran? Last year, we focused our summer professional development on getting teachers ready for virtual learning because that was a new frontier. Michael, was it 35?
Actually, we ran 75 sections of
75
professional development, 45 unique programs, and we had more than 70% of our teachers participating in one or more, many in 6 and 7 courses. Our teachers participate at tremendous levels. They're professionally very invigorated during the summer. And I would say it was, somewhere in the ballpark of probably 500 registrants overall, given the size of our faculty. So kudos to our teachers. They're committed, and they led many of those.
They led many. That's
They lead
exactly
them,
right.
they facilitate them, and then they participate on top of all of that in curriculum design and development, which was part of the professional development experience of both supporting the lab program I spoke of before, but also for developing preparedness for the hybrid model that we launched this year for the first time.
And this summer, we'll be focusing on lots of things, but one of the things we're going to continue to focus on is how do you assess kids using multiple measures? And those workshops will be led by our teachers. Just a commercial for teachers. I talked about the word grace. I want you to think about being an expert in your job and suddenly waking up the next day and realizing all the things you've been doing your entire career are now gone, and you need to figure out how to do it differently. This has been a never-ending roller coaster ride for teachers. And the work that they did last summer and the work that they will do this summer is critical to making your children feel whole. So I'm very proud of them. And I'm very proud that they give up most of their summers to continue to do this and get better. Because the mark of a great teacher is they're never satisfied with their pedagogy. They continue to get better at their work all the time. So sorry to jump in there, but I thought it was the right time.
Thank you.
You're
Not
welcome.
at all. Thank you. And to reiterate, I had an opportunity today in professional development to walk around and speak to teachers in the Purchase School, and all of them to a T said that they were eager to welcome students back, which also indicates the courage that they have. So these teachers are really impressive people, and I'm honored to work alongside of them. They are ready for your students. They're ready because they know them. And actually, teachers have said to me that this year, unlike others, they felt like in some ways they got to know your students more rapidly than they had in the past with greater depth. And that's a comment to what we had in the hybrid model, where we were able to have smaller class sizes and really get to understand our students better. The teachers couldn't be happier about welcoming students back in this reopening, because they know that it means increased instructional time in a face-to-face environment. So that's exciting for all of us. What teachers have already been doing throughout the entire year is creating a community within their cohorts. And now it's time to make those two cohorts into one community. Teachers aren't waiting until the reopening for that to happen. They've already begun that process, and I'll illustrate that for you in a moment. The second bullet point here is all the information that they've gained through that process I just spoke of in the wheel of assessment, multiple measures, they're going to take with them. And they already know a lot about your students about your children in terms of their likes, their dislikes, their hopes, their dreams, their strengths, and their areas of growth academically. So they'll hit the ground running with instruction that's personalized to each student. That is, that they will be able to design whole class instruction, small group instruction, and even conferences that are really targeting individual student needs. So more on that in a moment. Next slide, please. So the ways our students are already connecting with each other, regardless of what cohort they're in, is typically through technology right now. The bottom example here shows where groups of students, whether they're in school or at home learning, are grouped together to respond to a nonfiction text question in which they're to identify the main idea. It's a critical component of 4th grade literacy, so it's repeated throughout the year. Here's one of the places where students are engaging in that work, but also getting a chance to connect with each other through that. On the top right, we have a turn and talk. If you've ever seen a turn and talk done in a classroom, it's simply the students turn on the rug, they talk to each other to expand upon a point, share thinking, build upon each other's thinking. And this is happening now across cohorts with the use of Zoom. So the student on the iPad there is at home, and obviously the student with the earphones is in school, and they are connecting and communicating.
That's a great irony of this, right? We were worried that kids were somehow going to become less connected, and in some ways, it has helped them collaborate even more deeply.
And Dr. Cantor will speak to you now about how students are engaged in self-reflection.
Before you start, Jamie, I always like to narrate the stories. You know, first of all, I'm very happy to say it looks like most of our kids don't believe that Bigfoot is real. Thank God. It means our science program is working. But this work is so exciting to me. I just want to foreground it a little bit. This is work that's actually been going on pre-pandemic. We've had teams of experts that have been working on helping to build what are called proficiency scales. And Jamie's going to take you through this. Dr. Canner's going to take you through this. But this is actually one of the most important pieces of work we're doing, because it builds on all the good work that the Purchase School was doing prior to the pandemic about developing agency and voice. So I'm looking forward to hearing this part from both of you.
Thank you, Dr. Will. I am really excited for the return to school. And I think that I shouldn't say the return to school. We've been in school. It's returning all students together. That togetherness, I think, as you can tell from, I think, this whole presentation, we're all looking forward to that, and teachers as well. And teachers have been planning for the reorientation of students, continuing to create engaging experiences and being responsive to where students are. And that's really what Dr. Will is referring to when he refers to the proficiency scale work. That is not new. We've been working on this for some time. And it really goes back to what Michael Greenfield and Christian were talking about with multiple measures, and looking at all of the different ways we understand students and really understanding where they are and targeting, and then using that to inform instruction. But in addition to those assessments that are external and internal, I think what's happening also that's probably even more valuable are the student voices and student agency. And so on this slide, what you see is a self-assessment where a student is determining where they are. And what teachers do with this information is they use this to help them decide what's next, because it gives them insight into how a student sees themselves as a learner. And that's what the proficiency scales, that work we've been doing. It's not just for teachers to figure out where they are. It's for students to have ownership of where they are as learners, so that they can move themselves forward and they can see their strengths and then areas where they need to grow. And this work, again, is not new, but it's been amplified in this circumstance. We now have more tools at our disposal. Like, for example, this assessment was used on Google Classroom, where a kid could easily access it, and then a teacher could use it to support, again, their learning. So again, we're really excited for students to return and to continue that personalized learning and the proficiency scale work that we've started some time ago.
Thank you, Jamie. Before we go to the next slide, just a couple things, because I want to turn this back to Adam for a second, and Dominique. So one of the things that was shocking to me, I consider myself a researcher and a practitioner, is I saw some data that said when you allow students to self-assess, you give them meaningful tools to measure their own growth, their growth is exponentially increased. That when they own their ability to understand the expectation and they can measure, first of all, they grade themselves harder. So maybe those of you at home who can't get the kids to clean their room, you might want to give them a rubric and they can self-assess as to whether or not the room is really clean. It really does motivate a learner to understand expectations and to put it in their hands. And I think Purchase School in particular has done a really good job and their faculty of advancing this with Dominique and Adam's leadership. Adam, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is work that we've been focused on for a few years and really pushing forward. This is the good work of teachers, and taking the tools that we create as a district and thinking about ways to get them into kids' hands in a usable way so that students can know themselves. It's part of social emotional work. It's also part of academic work, self-awareness. So we really focus very explicitly on having kids know where they're at around a specific target, think about what they need, what the goal they're trying to reach is, and then what are the steps they need to take to get there. So it's not just about knowing where you are, but it's about knowing what to do next and giving them voice and choice as they move through those next steps to get to a goal.
Next slide.
So this is the final slide. So you've heard a lot tonight about everything we're doing as a district and as a school to be together again. And this picture represents our fifth graders, our entire fifth grades, both Husky and Pride. And we're looking forward to bringing all of our students back together again, to learning together, and for our fifth graders especially, to celebrating as we look towards graduation.
And I do realize, first of all, excellent job, folks. We have many open questions. We're going to revisit them all, but before we go any further, let's do just a big summary. So you may still have unanswered questions. We're going to go through the chat and see a few, but Adam is always available to answer those questions directly. We are working as hard as we can to get the kids back on the 22nd. I will inform you as to whether or not that's actually going to occur. What we wanted to show you tonight is that we are always in the planning stages. We are happy that your kids are coming back, frankly, sooner than we thought they would. We're happy that our kids are going to be safe. We're happy that our teachers have access to vaccinations. We appreciate your support on transportation and surveillance testing. A large part of how this is going to work, though, is out of our control. Our community needs to behave well. They need to be responsible. What happened at our high school, we had a number of kids show up after spring break and spread infection to other kids, not in school, but in their personal lives. You need to take this seriously. Remember that students will not be vaccinated before the close of this school year. Before we close, I'm going to ask Brian, if you wouldn't mind, take us through the 8 million iterations of quarantining that occurred today, because there is some progress. You know, we lobbied to get teachers who are vaccinated not to have to be quarantined. That was accomplished today. That's a good thing. However, there are a bunch of things that are confusing to you folks, because some of them apply to you, but they don't apply to your kids. So you need to understand that if you go on vacation, the standards for returning are very different than if your kids go. Children aren't going to be vaccinated. So I want, Brian, can you tease that out for folks?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. It has been confusing for many people I know, partly because we get statements and declarations from the governor's office, but unless and until the New York State Department of Health issues guidance on those issues or on those topics, school districts don't have actionable information. So we're obligated, just to underscore something you said earlier, Dr. Will, we're obligated to follow the New York State Department of Health guidance, even when the governor has made a declaration or a statement. So just yesterday, there were two important pieces of guidance that came from the New York State Department of Health. So that means it's actionable guidance for New York State public school districts. And they both have to do with people who are vaccinated. So for people who have been fully vaccinated, 2 weeks after the point at which they're fully vaccinated, they are no longer subject to quarantine for travel, domestic travel, or if they happen to have exposure to somebody who has tested positive. And that second piece is in particular very important for us, because we currently have had teachers, we're just finishing some quarantines of teachers who are fully vaccinated, but have had to quarantine based on a positive exposure. Now, with this guidance that we got yesterday, because they're fully vaccinated and they have to be 2 weeks past their point of vaccination, then they no longer have to quarantine for exposure for the next 90 days. So that's good news. That's going to help us keep our teachers and staff in our schools teaching kids where they want to be. And that's really helpful. The newest information that came out today is the governor announced that the travel restrictions on the state of New York will be lifted as of April 1st for domestic travel only, not for international travel. But even while we've been on this call, I've been texting with an epidemiologist from the Westchester County Department of Health to find out if, in fact, New York State Department of Health is going to issue consistent guidance with that governor declaration that came today. And she said, we are awaiting that from the Department of Health. It's not here yet. It's not here today. But what would that mean? If the New York State Department of Health issues guidance consistent with that executive statement from the governor today, then on April 1st, any day after April 1st, people who travel domestically, which is the United States and its territories, upon their return after April 1st, they're not obligated to quarantine. But here's what's really important to say about that. And the guidance from the governor even makes this clear. It is still recommended that people observe all of the safety precautions associated with remaining healthy during a pandemic. Monitoring for symptoms, wearing masks, avoiding non-essential travel. Those expectations are still in place, and we're looking for parents' partnership to help us with that, because we know following the February break that we had a significant uptick in the number of cases, exclusively attributed to activity over the holidays. And that's not to disparage. We understand we're all desiring to be with family and to travel and to do the things that none of us have been able to do. But when that happens, it clearly brings a consequence back to our schools, and then we're duty bound and obligated to quarantine based on those exposures. So we're asking for parents' partnership to help us see that through and to get to brighter days this coming spring.
Thank you, Brian. Very helpful. Adam, could you stop the screen share for a sec? So folks, there's a lot in there. Just know this, your children are not going to be vaccinated. So the rules that apply to adults do not apply to your children. So if you vacation and you're vaccinated, your kids are not. And all of those standards that apply to people that are not vaccinated apply to your children. That's right now the simplest way to think about this. And you can help us. You can also help your teachers. And I've said this a lot. And we sincerely know how difficult this has been on families. We really do. Every one of our board members has children in the district, and they cover the gamut from elementary, middle, and high school, and they're experiencing what you're experiencing. But ultimately, keeping our schools open is dependent on your help. So how can you help your teachers? Don't take advantage of the virtual option to take a vacation because it's convenient. And here's why. I saw a question in the chat, and Christian, thank you for answering it. We're asking enough of our teachers. If in fact you're committing to being in Harrison, come to school or stay virtual, because it's a lot to manage the back and forth. We want you to come back, and if you want to come back, you change your mind, we will help you get there. But please be judicious. Remember what teachers are facing. Try to help them in that respect. Philomena asked a really good question. I don't have the answer to it. And the way we work in our organization is we don't close the door on anything. So once we know how many kids are actually going to be virtual, there are a host of considerations as to whether or not we would create an exclusively virtual class of, say, kindergarten or first grade. Here's my concern. Think about the other side of that equation. So if I have to do that, and your child's an in-person learner, and they've had a particular teacher since the beginning of the year, and I pull that teacher and make her the virtual learner, now I have a whole group of kids who don't know their teacher. The same is true on the virtual side. Even though they might have been physically there, they're emotionally connected to that teacher. So convenience is one thing. Social emotional well-being is another. We try as hard as we can to tease out every possibility of every decision. And I promise you this, the only thing that matters to me at the end of the day is what is in the best interest of the most children. So I can't answer that question one way or the other yet. I haven't closed the door, but we will figure it out. I don't know who Mrs. G's maternity leave is yet. And if I did, I don't know we'd be ready to share that. Adam, can you clarify? I thought you did the question about snacks versus lunch. In my mind, kids are 6 feet of socially distanced at lunch because their masks are off for the entire period. But I think you mentioned that snacks occurred in a broader setting. Can you just revisit that?
Yeah, so first of all, snacks will occur behind a barrier, whereas lunch, we're not having them because they'll be at a full 6 feet. But we're also looking at how we can spread more distance for snacks as well. So looking at going outside to larger spaces or having kids sit in alternating groups to have their snack.
And I know Adam, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
How long are the snacks generally? Like 5-6 minutes? I mean, aren't they quick breaks?
They're very brief, and we're going to keep them below 10 minutes because, as Brian Ladewig reminds us, that keeping your mask off for 10 minutes creates a different standard as well. So we talked about literally timing snacks. We don't want kids to choke, but outdoors is going to become a big variable in this equation very soon. As the weather gets nice, I've seen more social and emotional well-being at the middle school advanced by mass breaks than almost anything else. It's amazing what being outside and connecting in that way will bring. Adam, I know you spoke today at length about recess. There's another question here about the use of balls, and just talk about, we talked about the playground. Can you just reiterate that part?
Yes. So students will be allowed to use equipment and play games outside. We're going to be, moving towards that. They're going to have to sanitize just as they would going out to the playground before they use equipment, and then sanitize on the way back in. But we will be moving towards and working towards bringing in equipment, and the aides have done some training with the physical education department as to look about games that are appropriate, and we're going to be adding to that. I talked to our athletic director today, and he's going to be working with us to further that as we can bring in more equipment. I also wanted to take the opportunity at this point to talk about the work the aides have been doing and their continued learning throughout this entire process to support kids, and their additional work they've been doing, scanning kids at the door and all the extra things they've been picking up to really support our community.
Thank you. So before we close, I just want to say, first of all, thank you to the 122 of you that are still here. That's amazing. I also want to thank, as I've said a million times, our teachers for their incredible commitment to your children. I need to recognize our administrators, though, because they're kind of quiet, unsung heroes. They have been working every day, every night, including weekends. The level of preparation that the team has done is beyond admirable. It's inspirational to me. But I also want to recognize Dino and Kelly Kozak and the other 5 trustees. And I said this last night at the board meeting, and I mean it. I've been your superintendent for 20 years. I stay because I'm never asked to make an unethical decision. I'm never asked to make a decision that isn't in the best interest of kids, even when we are walking a different path than many other districts. That's a critical element that makes our district unique. We care about everybody's child. No one gets a special deal, but no one is overlooked. We're trying as hard as we can to make this return meaningful for kids. I'm going to continue to fight the barrier fight. I haven't given that up. It doesn't make sense. We're going to continue to push against the system. But in the meantime, I hope you understand that we have done our level best to see your children. They're not dots on a scattergram. They're human beings. The dots on the scattergram help us inform who they are as human beings. And when they come back, we're not turning the lights on. We're preparing for that return. Dominique did a great job of talking about what's going to happen during the day. Jamie showed you how we're giving kids ownership. We talked, Christian shared all the different ways we're looking at your kids. Michael mentioned we've been studying 3 years of data on your individual children. Adam's been leading agency and student voice for a prolonged period of time. We have ventilation, we have testing, we have vaccinations. Be excited. Whether it hits the 22nd, and I'm still optimistic it will, isn't the critical variable. We're the critical variable. I'm excited.
I just want to add, just as a parent hat right now, that what goes on behind the scenes is incredible. These people, the administrators, the faculty and staff, your teachers, day in, day out, the instructional coaches, aides, principals, there is not a moment where they are not working harder than they have ever worked to get this right. And you know what? There's going to be bumps in the road. Nothing is perfect. This is a work in progress. And just as Dr. Wool was just saying, Brian Ladwig was explaining, we don't even know exactly. Cuomo made an announcement and we're not even sure exactly what that means, and if the New York State Department is going to follow that lead or not. Every day, there are things happening at Mach speed, and the best thing that I can say as a parent and as a board trustee and seeing what actually goes on behind the scenes, ask questions, communicate. You don't have to wait to your next PTA meeting, but you do have to have patience and have respect and have courtesy. We didn't create COVID. Your principal didn't create COVID. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, everything that's going on right now is at the best interest for the health and safety of your family and your children. So please just understand, we are literally at the finish line and the kids are going to be back in school. It's been a year. It has been a challenging year, and I'm living this with every one of you. So thanks for coming and listening, because it's also important, but we
And
we are
last
an
thank you.
incredible school district.
One more thank you. Thank you to the parents. And I know Adam's going to share and he's going to close out, but Facebook is not truth. Facebook is what people sometimes having an anxiety attack in the middle of the night post. And so I want to thank the purchase parents in particular, because you have helped so much by being informed and sharing real information, because sometimes people say things that create a sense of panic. I can promise you have nothing to panic about. We care about your children as if they were our own. When they cross that threshold, those kids are my kids. We would not bring them back. I'm just telling you right now, we're not going to bring them back based on the rules. I'm not bringing kids back to a classroom without ventilation and barriers because somebody says it's safe. The research that I say says it's not safe. And the board won't let me do it because they support what's in your best interest. But you guys have been tremendously helpful to us throughout this period, and we appreciate it. Don't think it doesn't go unnoticed. Every time you share the truth, it makes a teacher's life easier. It makes a principal's life easier. And more importantly, it makes your kid's life better.
And in a moment of crisis, that's when the true leaders shine. And this superintendent we have here is leading the charge like no other. So we are all in good hands and it's all happening. So,
and I'll verify that. He's been here 20, I've been in this district 22 years. And I think we've seen almost about everything. Hopefully this will be the last of whatever, but we don't know what it's gonna hold for the future. But we got an excellent team, and it just gets better every day.
Well, thank you. But I'm going to give Mr. Gutterman, since it's his school, the last word. And by the way, team, phenomenal job. Thank you for all your hard work, everybody.
So one final personal note. It's a privilege to get to come to Purchase School every day and work with your kids. But it's also a privilege to get to work with such dedicated and professional and tireless teachers. And it makes coming here really meaningful. And I can guarantee you that everything you heard tonight is their work. And they're so thoughtful about what they do. And I'm just honored to get to be a part of this team.
Well, we did that in record time. It's 8:30. You guys were great questions. Remember, if you have anything that wasn't answered, Mr. Gutterman's always available. Thanks to everybody for being here and sticking with us. I don't know who's in charge, but we can end the meeting now. Good night, all.